Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the eDiscovery channel in absentia, in exile. This is Tom O'Connor, your expatriate moderator, and as an expat, I am currently located in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. I'm sure by the time we broadcast this, you will all have heard about the hurricane that swept through our area. New Orleans is completely without power, and through the good graces of our friend and professional colleague, Craig Baer, Seamus, my son, and I are at his luxurious office space in Baton Rouge, which has power, air conditioning, Wi-Fi, and a refrigerator. It has pretty much all the nuances of civilized living. And downstairs, there's a coffee shop, a bar with burgers. There's half a dozen businesses open here, so we're far better off than we were on Monday morning. Rocky, as always, and I'm sorry, thanks to everyone who's been reaching out. Obviously, we had no power. We also lost our cell phone coverage. Thanks, AT&T, for 24 hours. So it was some people in my family, especially, were coming a little unglued because you don't hear from someone, and they're in a hurricane, and it's unsettling. So, Rocky,
if you can't mark yourself safe on Facebook, then I don't know that you're safe. So
no, and an indication of their technical prowess. AT&T, of course, I didn't get this text until 2 days later. Sent a text to all their customers saying, "Oh, we're sorry if you're having trouble connecting to the network. If you're having trouble connecting to the network, we suggest that you try to find a Wi-Fi network and connect to that, and then use Wi-Fi to call." Now, first of all, how the hell do you think I'm going to get this message if the network is down, right? Second of all, since the power is down, good idea. I'll just connect to that Cox cable Wi-Fi network that isn't working in my living room. I mean, it was like I've saved it. I'm going to do a post about this somewhere down there. Like, thanks a lot. What sixth graders did you guys have running that network? At any event, Rocky, how you doing?
I am doing great. It's
good.
All is good. All is good over here. We're beginning of September, and kids are back in school. Life is getting back to normal.
September 1st, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's good to hear. The kids are back to school. The words every parent loves to hear. School starts tomorrow. Yay!
Yay!
Oh yeah.
Break out the line. Anyway,
we are delighted to have with us Duane Lites, who I'm sure is familiar to many of you. Duane's been the director of litigation support, at Jackson Walker for 15, 16 years now. Duane, been in the business forever, which we'll get to in a second. I first met you years and years ago when you started what I believe was the first legal BBS. Is that a fair statement?
It is. I mean, I think for the at least open to the public, let's just say.
Okay.
There were other we call listservs or communications, but they were somewhat private.
Right.
And ours was, we created it to where it was open to anyone as long as they behaved, and that was the challenge.
Which eliminated half the people in our profession right away. Well, there's no archive postings for me on that list, sir.
Yeah.
But Wayne, when did you start it?
Go ahead.
We started it in the late 90s. I think it was around 1997, 98, way before any type of social media, predated probably cell phones as well. And so cell phones that existed were not like they weren't smartphones.
Right.
And but it mainly just started because we were looking for a way to just reach out, with typical issues you have in lit support, but just reach a broader audience, not being totally reliant upon the software provider for an answer, because that was in a lot of cases we were using products that really weren't designed for the legal industry. They were designed for some other industry, and so we were having to make them work. And so we started off, and Boyd Savage, who was with, out of Fredericks, actually in Minneapolis, was I was working with him, and we had some ideas about how to do it, and we put it up and started off with just a post to about 20 or 30 people, and it just kind of kept growing. And I think over time, I think when we finally shut it down, we were right at around 10,000 people that subscribed to it.
Well, let's back up a little bit. That was the late '90s, which in our lifetime, Duane, Rachi, that of course is the highlight of his professional career was the late '90s. Well, take us back to when you get started. How did you? Are you a Dallas native?
I wasn't. Career-wise, yes. I was born in Texas, but started my career in Dallas, and actually,
what got you into this? How'd you join this wacky profession?
Well, I started out as a computer programmer. It's kind of how, which not in the legal industry. I was actually working for an oil and gas company, and then eventually went to a service provider that at the time that just managed. At that time, that was pre servers and computers. Most anyone that had a business was running on some type of timeshare off EDS or some mainframe or something like that. Right. So anyway, there was a guy there that was working at the at EDS, and he went in-house with a company called American Legal Systems, and as their technology director, and he hired about 4 or 5 of us because they had probably one of the biggest cases at the time is one of the big asbestos litigations out of California. They had so many exhibits, they had to move it to a high school auditorium just to get everything in, the whole entire case. And he hired a bunch of us just to write, believe it or not, load files from
I believe it.
Convert in order to load into the system at the time, which was, it's not around any longer, but it was called Inquire back at the time. Tom, you may remember that. I don't know, Rachi, that might predate you, but so we wrote load files, and something that, believe it or not, still happens today. But so that was our whole purpose, was just to take information that was being through data entry or keyed in, and we would format it to the right format to load into this database at the time, which so I had no idea about the legal industry, nothing about it other than, we wrote, and that's kind of how I got started. So, and then that was in the early, I guess, mid 80s at the time. And so it goes all the way back to the 80s. But that's how I got my start, and I've stayed in it ever since, so it's just, I was with them about 8 years, and then I left, went with a consulting company at the time, because that was during the time, and this was probably around in the early 90s, that imaging, where we took everything from paper and started imaging it. And so I went to work for a consulting company for about 1.5 years, doing mainly as the imaging expert.
Yep.
Got tired of the travel, and then there was a position in a law firm. At that time, it was Locke Purnell, but now it's Locke Lord. And so, so I went in as their lit support manager. But as most people at that time, you were kind of a one-man band when you went in there, and that's. Can you
fix my printer?
Yeah. So that's how I got introduced to the law firm side, and then I left there. I was there about 5 years, then went over to Thompson Knight for about 4, and then ended up at Jackson Walker for the last 15.
Wow,
great. So you've seen the range of the growth of not just hardware, but programs, lit support, and dragged kicking and screaming like myself into the wonderful world of eDiscovery.
Yeah, I've gone from the paper world to the electronic world all the way through. It's a kind of in a lot of ways, it's it's good to have experienced that. I think for some of us too, that I don't know how many of y'all watched the Little League World Series, but when they handed them an old analog phone, and they all looked at it, and they looked at the numbers on it, the rotary phone, and they just said, "Oh, what is this? Some kind of toy or something?" They'd never seen it before.
Yeah.
Right.
But having for us that do know what those things phones were, but it's kind of like with the paper. It's good to have gone through that period of time. Just we don't get paper that much, but we still do every once in a while, and it's nice to know how to deal with it, because if you've never seen it before, or ever, if you've only come into this industry and worked with eDiscovery, then it's when you see I've got to deal with paper. Well, what do you do with that? So.
Exactly, and since so much of litigation is dealing in the past, you do still end up with
Oh yeah.
I remember when I had to when we were already probably 2008, 2009, so already in the eDiscovery era, but we had to go into a manufacturing plant that was was manufacturing boilers, and it was an asbestos case, but all the boilers that were in question had been installed 30, 40, 50 years ago, these industrial boilers, and yeah, everything was paper, oilskin, and having to figure out how to deal with that stuff, and it's a totally different world from what most of the people entering into the industry in the last 5 years, 10 years are used to. But yeah, it's frustrating. I can tell you that, dealing with some of that stuff. But it's also it's an interesting challenge.
Oh yeah.
So. Okay, so most of your career's been in the law firm space, and you've seen throughout all the various different iterations and the software tools and things that have come and gone. I'm going to start with what was your favorite tool? What was your favorite application that you've ever dealt with throughout your career?
I don't know if it, the one tool that I really liked, but for whatever reason, they never could get it where it needed to go, even though I think it had a lot of promise, was in Magic's DB TextWorks. And I'm not saying, I'm gonna kind of categorize, that was kind of my favorite PC application at the time.
Okay.
You had summation, you had concordance, which were the predominant players at the time, but DB TextWorks came out at the time with one of the first Windows products that really worked at the time, and then they came out with Windows 95 and some of the other Windows apps, and it was really stable, but it was really geared more towards the library, and but it had a lot of features that were really, but they never could get it right, and they always kept the focus on the library side of the application rather than the legal and litigation, where summation and concordance kind of they probably focus more on that, but it had a lot of features. So I would say, we tried religiously to try to make that work, just because it had a lot of things we liked about it. But as far as other eDiscovery tools that came along, and applications, I would probably say, one of the first ones that came out that was really well until all these products have a lifespan under the sun, so to speak, and Clearwell was another good product. Until Symantec took over and killed it. And so and I'll
not judging.
So but we've right now we're using Relativity, but I've used all the products. We've used Ringtail, we've used quite a few, And, I don't know that the way I always approach products is, I never got truly married to one. I tried to use the best of breed approach, where whatever tool was kind of the best. That's a lot harder to do now, but back in the day, early days, you could do that. And just, because there was no one product that did everything right. You typically had something for discovery and review, and you had something to handle the transcripts, something to handle the trial support. So you had to kind of use a mix of products. And so we always approached it, like that, as far as we've always, every firm I've been at, we've always pretty much used the best of breed approach.
Right. And do you think that the fact that you were moderating the, lit support list for all of those years, gave you, I assume that it gave you more exposure to tools and opinions and thoughts and hearing what people were using. Were you using that to your advantage at the law firms, being able to pick and choose that information from what was available, or was it really just a secondary on the side and not so much using it in your daily work life?
No, I think that was the whole purpose. It kind of got created in the beginning, is to get feedback on different products or problems you may be having, or just to run a survey to see what other people may be doing. And so I think all of us were trying to, that was the whole purpose, to try to reach out to a broader audience than, just the people you knew or you might run into at Legal Tech or ILTA or something like that. So because we're all in the same business, we all are doing the similar things, maybe using different products, but at the end of the day, the process is the same. You get stuff in, you process it, you go through a review, produce it. Every law firm is doing the same thing, and so but they do it with different tools and some similar tools that you may be using. So if you can reach out and educate yourself on something, and so all of us were using it to our advantage, and that was the purpose of it.
Yeah, and I know. Sorry, Tom. Go ahead.
Well, no, I was just going to say to that point, like today, I know if I'm able, I'm shut down in my city, we got no power, and I can go 80 miles, to the west, and there's a city that's not fully recovered, but I can plug back into the matrix, right? Mm-hmm. Back in. And back then there was no matrix. Yeah. Right. And so the bulletin board exposed me to a whole lot of people who I maybe had read an article they wrote, or maybe had seen them speak someplace, but there was no contact. So it literally created that community of 10,000 people eventually, who were all talking about the things that all matter to us. To me, it was groundbreaking because it was the first electronic community in our space. I'm not saying it was the first one anywhere, but in legal, we had a whole bunch of people who didn't talk to each other and could compare notes on, what about this? What about that summation load file? What about a DII? Blah, blah, blah. How does Envision handle that? It was great. It was great.
Yeah, but the problem, by the time I joined it, which was probably in about 2001, you had to spend so much time picking through the vendor sales pitches and the bias kind of approaches, but there were nuggets. There was real information that really helped it helped me to make it in my career, in terms of being able to find information and being able to search back and see what people did. It was really so. Thank you, Duane. Yeah. I don't know that.
Yeah, Duane, really. Yeah. You did for our space, for the lit support, and eventually eDiscovery space, but sort of what ILTA did for the IT people, which was let everybody talk to each other and push off that vendor influence and say, what did you really experience with this?
And that was, that was one of the reasons that, ILTA had, at that time, they were, I think, LawNet they were called, but
E-Slug.
they had their own private, if you were an ILTA member and they wanted to keep it closed down. And so we went with more of the public.
Yeah.
And originally when we started the list, we didn't moderate it, which quickly we found out that had to be moderated, because even though stuff kind of came through, but we also wanted to let vendors as well as, law firm consultants, whoever may want to join it could, provided that, and that's why we went to moderating it, because some people try to take advantage of it, and send some type of sales pitch or something, and we would have to knock it out. So I would say, from, I don't know, it may have been 3 months, or it may be not even that long that it was unmoderated, but it quickly became moderated, and we moderated all the way to the end. Greg Buckles helped me moderate it. Patrick Matthews was another person that helped.
Yep.
I mean, we had several of us doing it because, we had to, we would probably get, several hundred messages a day, and we would go through it and release or delete, and sometimes we would give a response of why, and sometimes we wouldn't. But it was a lot of fun. It was work, but I think it was helpful, for the industry, and I think a lot of us, realized that, so we kept it going.
Right.
So what today, from a education standpoint, from a, first of all, what year did the live support list shut down?
That was probably about 10 years ago. We finally just, basically when social media started coming out, LinkedIn and Facebook and, other venues that was really more geared, it really had the platform that was better suited. That's when it kind of started fading out. And, but, it served its purpose for a while, and then but it got replaced, which was fine, because I think, there are better ways now to communicate, socially than, but at the time, it was the only game in town.
So what do you use in your, what's your replacement today? What have you adapted your work life to, in terms of when you need answers, when you need advice, when you need, thoughts, or when you're giving advice and you found something cool? Where do you tend to go today?
I would say LinkedIn is probably what I use the most there's, it seems to be, it does cover a broader area of topics and things like that, but for the most part, and it's got groups and that have spawned from it. But I would say that is my primary, just as far as a communication platform.
Right, having a community that people can get together. So that's cool. What over your career, what have you seen? I think you've seen, again, that paper to the electronic paper, because we can't forget the blowback era. And for those who are newer to the industry, it used to be that you'd get a PST and you would just go ahead and print that entire thing out and send, one PST would get sent over to the vendor and 40 boxes would return. So
copy, label, copy. Right, Brian? Copy, label, copy.
Yeah. And then you'd have about 5,000 of them that would be blank, and you'd try to explain why they're blank.
Yeah, or one line, one line that was the border from 8,000 rows in Excel. So, but what do you think has been the biggest change in the legal technology industry over the course of your career? Like, what's that one shift that you were like, wow, this has really changed the industry?
I was thinking that, when I got into this business, everything was, I wouldn't say it was in the cloud, but it was on a mainframe. So it's somewhat like a cloud. You didn't have it on premise. It was and then we went through the period, the PC revolution, and then everything got brought in. Everybody wanted to bring everything in house. Then we kind of graduated to where server-based applications. So we stayed in-house. But now we're kind of going to the cloud with most stuff, which is kind of where, you know, if you stay in this business long enough, you're going to take a full circle. And it's kind of it's kind of strange that I started out when things were pretty much remote, you know, off premise as far as your applications, and now we're moving everything back to that same environment. And so I think that's good in a way, because I can see why. I mean, for most firms or even corporations, you know, it's, you know, the cost, the infrastructure cost to not only maintain and build those applications and secure those, and then securing those applications as well. It's a huge challenge. It's a much more so than you know, when you could easily lock everything down internally in your own building. It's impossible to function like that today. So you have to go to the cloud, and then and I think as far as legal applications, litigation support, and others are good targets to move to the cloud, because in most cases you're not. It's not like moving your accounts, you know, your accounting system or things like that, or your document management system within a firm, which impacts everybody. It touches everybody. Where you know, so I think that, you know, moving to the cloud, you know, in the beginning, you know, because it's not like the moving to the cloud has been, you know, law firms are always slow to do that, but I think the applications now are becoming much better. Actually, they're better than, you know, the on-premise, and I think that's where the development goes to the cloud version. Because it can maintain, you know, and you can maintain upgrades and things like that. And it's much easier to implement upgrades, you know, when it's in the cloud, because you're not trying to maintain all the different versions that are on premise. So I think that's the big change that most people are having to deal with and embrace. And I, you know, it's a change that I think it's good. You know, it's something that we've got to learn how to deal with. It's not easy to move to that direction, but I think that's where I think most firms, I would say the sooner you can get there. I mean, I think 5 years ago it wasn't quite ready, but I think it's you know, now it's the time to to move that direction. Yeah, no, there's definitely, it's interesting because I think you said it best. The law firms are slow to change when it comes to this stuff, and you know, whereas a lot of the rest of the industries have, even the banks have been moving stuff to the cloud already for a couple of years. You know, slower than a lot of other industries, but and the law firms are now at that point where they're ready, and they see the advantages, and they can actually understand what's going on there, and why it's advantageous to the overall firm and to the users. So cool. Yeah. Let's go back in time a little bit to when you and I first started interacting. You know, we actually we were both active on the editorial board of Litigation Support Today. Yep. Which was a magazine, as opposed to LTN, which today is pretty much the only major publication geared towards the litigation technology space. But Litigation Support Today really focused on litigation support. It was less about some of the other things that LTN was covering at the time, and really focused on the end users and on how to get things done, right? Yeah. Not so much pontificating and going through, you know, speaking and this and that. It was really about, as an end user, what do you need to do? So hands-on type articles, and really focused on that. And unfortunately, the magazine only made it probably, what, 4 years, something like that. Yeah. Yeah. But what do you see today? Again, and maybe it's just, again, that social media aspect of it that came up, and the availability of being able to get out there and find this information.
But do you see that people are able to get that same kind of information and that same, again, not to the high-end attorney, but to the people in the trenches, the people who are dealing with litigation support on a daily basis? Are they able to get that type of information? And maybe we need to talk to Albert and resurrect the magazine.
Yeah, I mean, I think Albert did a great job at the time and putting that magazine together. And then from that, we spawned a couple of conferences out of it that were well attended and, a lot of work, but did well. And, at the time, I really thought that, it would continue that way, but a lot of things changed as far as, the print media and things like that, and things became more online. But, there's resources today, like ACEDS is a good organization. For many years, the EDRM, which I talked to George Socia last week about. I still remember the early days when he had his first meeting and got a lot of people together and developed, the kind of the EDRM standard, and then everybody kind of went off and started doing their pieces on it. And it was really him and Tom both did a great job of starting that, and then to see where it finished and how it's being used today. And it was, and a lot of people had put a lot of work into that, and he did a great job of garnering a lot of resources, and getting all the right people in place, and a whole lot of people in the industry contributed to that. But and to see that it's become a standard today that people are using, and it's even gone even further to where it's but I would say that the resources from that is and like I say, ACEDS is one that I see that's really focused right now on educating the community. And so I think it's a good resource to not only get certified, but they have a lot of great content that's available from that. So I think that's kind of been a replacement for for some of the publications were always nice to get, read the articles about somebody and what they did, but it's nice to see some organizations that have put the effort in to stay relevant and to give, because, I think when a lot of us got in this business, we didn't really know it was going to be a career or if it was, what it was going to be. We were doing, it was a job at the time. We didn't know if it's going to be an industry or not, but it was just something that to get a paycheck from. But to see that it's now become an industry where it is, and like I said, I started as a one-man band in my first firm, and now I've got 9 or 10 people that work for me and stuff. So I mean, it's definitely growing. I think firms realized they needed that position, and it's really an invaluable position when you think of the electronic information you get today. You really need people that are technical but also have a good legal understanding. I mean, I've got 2 people that actually 3 that came from being a paralegal, but they were technical enough that they spent the time they needed to really dive in and understand the technical component.
Make that
I've seen attorneys make that jump, but they have to, you got to be willing to dig in. And then if you're a technical person, then you have to dig into the legal side. So it's kind of a work that you have to make that effort. You have to understand what the business is about, regardless of what side you're coming from.
Right. I mean, it doesn't come naturally to all of us like it does to Tom, where you're able to get so. Right. Yeah. Both sides of the coin.
I'm plugged into the ether, I just download the data.
Okay, so I've got one more question before we turn it over to Tom to wrap it up. If you were to try to, make a prediction of where we're headed, there's obviously all the buzzwords, AI, machine learning, et cetera, that people talk about, but in terms of practicality, Tom and I are practical. We don't like to talk about the buzzwords. It's really about, okay, is this actually going to be useful to people? Are people going to be able to really take advantage of the tools and the things that are out there? Where do you see over the next 5 years, what's actually going to make a difference in our industry? What are the things that are, and it could just be the cloud that you already talked about, but do you see anything else out there that's really, this has the potential to truly make a difference?
Yeah, I think you see some things going on right now with a lot of it has to do with the collection of all the various sources. That seems to be it's a challenge right now because so much information is being done on your cell phones and smartphones, but it's also very difficult to get information off of them. You have to have a lot of cooperation with whoever you're trying to deal with on the phone. And then most people don't, they have personal and business on there. So you get into a whole different area but getting that information from that, getting it from the other, Slack and some of the other communication chat areas, pulling all those different sources in. It's easy enough to deal with email and documents that are, that's just boilerplate standard stuff. But it's getting all that other information in, and then using the advanced tools, AI and other things like that, to sift through that and get to what's important, the relevant information, and weed out all the stuff that's not important. That's still, it's funny. We've been doing this for a long time. The process is the same. You're just getting so much more information now from different sources, but a lot of that information, it's not structured in a way that's easy to get into these applications, although they're building filters and plugins to try to make it all work. But, people expect when they're reviewing documents, especially if they're reviewing chat messages, for it to look like it is on their phone. Well,
right.
That's a challenge, but and the same with, keeping the threads together and all that. So I see that over the next, 3 to 4 years and 5 years, all that information that we're pulling in, from Twitter and Facebook and all that information, Messenger, all that into an application that can present it back the way it was, Instagram, all those tools back to the way that you would like to see it. And I know a lot of folks are working on that. Some people have some things already out, but I don't think anyone has, it's a lot of it's still in development as well. So that's where I see you got to be able to conquer that, because that's how people are communicating now, and they're going to be communicating more in the future that way. And you gotta simplify it down or normalize it to where people can actually use it and review it effectively.
Right, and the next piece of that is then telling the comprehensive story, because you're absolutely right. Step one there is the presentation side of actually getting it in a viewable state as expected. But then, and I've seen a couple of the tools out there that are doing some work here, but I think you're right. That's going to make a difference over the next couple of years of being able to piece together, how that email conversation flowed to the text messages that then flowed back to an IM chat that then flowed to WhatsApp, that, and all the different pieces there that's a good point. Getting that story right and getting it to the way that the reviewers actually expect it, that's going to make a huge difference. So, Tom, why don't you, unless you've got other questions, but why don't you?
No, I also just, there was a warning on my screen, Rocky, that we only have 5 minutes left in our meeting time. Will it cut off if we exceed that?
No, we're good. We're good, as long as Duane's still good. But
yeah, all right. Yeah.
Let's wrap it up anyway.
Yeah, these are our last two questions. The first one's an easy one. Beatles or Stones?
You know, I liked them both. I would probably say Stones, but I would even, if I could write in one, I'd say Aerosmith is really my favorite band of the day.
There you go.
So I just want you to know how happy you just made Tom, because I think he's been asking this question for at least 4 or 5 months to every guest that we have. And I think every single one has said Beatles up until now. So the fact that you said Stones made Tom's day.
It endears you to my heart even more. I only wish that Gail were here for a variety of reasons, but the fact that you would say Aerosmith, who was one of her favorite bands, she was friends with a couple of guys in the band, and she would have loved that answer as well. So here's our final question, the one we asked everybody. If you could spend a day with somebody from our profession, somebody you've met over the years, they don't have to be alive even, somebody you met and they've passed on, but you could spend a day with them doing, you know, whatever you want. It doesn't have to be work related. It doesn't have to be doing load files. It could be, you know, playing 18 with Johnny Graham, you know, whatever you want to do. Who would it be, and what would you do and why?
I would probably say that, you know, you know, and these two, I would say two, and both of them have passed early. And one would be Browning Moreno, which we all miss him. The other one is Nigel Murray. I mean, I miss Nigel. I would love to go play 18 with both of them. I love to play golf, and I wouldn't even care if they could golf or not, but I'd love to go play around with them and just chat. But I miss them both. They both went too early, and you know, Nigel was a character, but Browning was so knowledgeable and was always willing to take time to visit with you, and always great to see them both at the conferences, and miss seeing them. So I'd like to see them again.
I agree. I totally agree.
Absolutely.
Well, Duane, thanks so much for your time. I know you're a busy guy, and I appreciate your taking time to chat with us. You and I, particularly great to have you, because you and I usually only see each other at a conference.
Yeah.
Right. And, you know, I didn't go to ILTA this year just because of of COVID and then, you know, some other complications with their administration. But in legal tech last year, of course, you know, I've probably been a couple of years since I've seen you face to face.
Yeah, for the record, I did attend ILTA this year. And,
how was it?
It was a ghost town.
Yeah.
Wow.
Okay.
It was, I've been to probably 20. I've been there, you know.
Yeah.
It just wasn't even, it was a shell of what it typically is. I applaud the folks that all went, especially a lot of the vendors and providers. I mean, I've never seen it like that. It was, I'm looking forward to when it, to next year. Hopefully a lot of this will be behind us. It'll get back to normal, but it was, it was unfortunate, but you know, at least they're trying to bring it back. And, but it wasn't anything close to what it typically is.
Yeah. Obviously, Gail wasn't there, and she and I had been going for 22, 23 years, but our son Seamus is working for Joy Morrow, and so he went out, and basically Joy had a suite. She didn't have a booth, and Seamus hung out in the suite and met people and went to a couple of parties and got, you know, I said the same thing to him. I said, trust me, this is just, you know, like
a little piece of what it was.
Was that his first one?
Yeah, his first one.
Oh,
first time ever. Yeah.
Yeah, he needs to.
He'll be back next year.
He needs to come back when it's back, because I ran into somebody else. It was their first one, and I said, "Oh, this is you need." To me, I said this was for golfers, a mulligan is like a do-over.
Yes.
It was a mulligan year for ILTA this year.
Yes. Yeah. And I'm with you. Hope that it comes back strong next year, and look forward to seeing you there. So, thanks again, Duane. Really appreciate your time, and Rachi as always. And to all our listeners, hopefully by the time this airs, I will be back in New Orleans, knock on wood, and and have electricity. I can go back to New Orleans. I just hope I have electricity.
Right, there's nothing to go back
I
to,
hope
but-
so.
Yeah. So we'll see you all next time on the eDiscovery
All right,
channel.
good chatting,
Thanks.
Rachi and Tom. Thank you.